Does quantum mechanics prove God? The answer to that is yes. Now, there is a wide range of different theories behind quantum mechanics, but we will look at just kind of a simplified basis of what quantum mechanics is. And basically, in summary, is in quantum mechanics, is if you know what something is doing, you don't know where it is. And if you know where it is, you don't know what it is doing. So this basically in an example is when we think of like a ruler. Let's say the ruler has 12 inches, right? When we cut that in half, immediately there are two different sections. One is 6 inches, the other one is 6 inches as well. Let's say we take one of those and we cut that in half. Now we have 3 inches and 3 inches. When you continue to chop this up, it continues to get smaller and smaller and smaller. We went from 12 inches to 6 inches to 3 inches, and then when we keep going and going, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But what quantum mechanics reveals is that it is impossible to have this go on infinitely. Eventually, there comes a point when something is so small that it no longer is an actual particle, so to speak, but it is a wavelength of potentiality. Now, what this means is when we continue to bring things down to the very smallest level, eventually, let's say you take the smallest particle known to man and you were to just be able to somehow, put it on a slit to where it would break off. Now, what you would think is with this smallest particle is that it would split and divide into two things. But in actuality, when it hits that, there's actually a wavelength of possibility. So, in better understanding, let's just say you were to take a basketball and throw it at a knife. Instead of the basketball splitting into two, it would basically spread out to where there would be a wavelength of different possibilities. Now, what we had said before in quantum mechanics, if you know what something is doing, then you don't know where it is. But if you know where it is, you don't know what it's doing. So this means that on the very micro, smallest scale known to man, there is a wavelength of all these different possibilities. And in this wavelength, wherever you're able to see and wherever you look within this wavelength, basically the wavelength collapses, and that's where you will find that particle. So again, let's say you put the particle on a slit instead of it, the smallest particle, instead of it breaking into two spots, it becomes a wavelength of different options. And wherever you see on that wavelength, that particle collapses into that particle that it once was. Now, how can we come to understand how does this even relate to God? Well, first and foremost, we know that there are many different variables and possibilities that could happen throughout this life. I mean, we look around, we ourselves can create a different world, so to speak. We can be part of a different world if we choose to stay indoors on one day, let's say Sunday, or if we choose to go out in public and meet new people. Those are different worlds because one, we're socializing with different people, we're getting to know people, but then the other, we're just staying at home and then we did not meet those people that we otherwise could have and might have been future friends. There are all these different possibilities that could happen. And God, we know from Revelation, is the Alpha, the Omega, the first, the last, and the beginning and the end. And we know that the earth is fine-tuned in such a way where there's no way that it could happen by mere chance or even necessity. Roger Penrose, who is a brilliant mathematician, I believe he worked alongside Stephen Hawking in the past when he was alive, he has come to find that the universe beginning in the state of the initial low entropy, the odds of that happening just by chance are 1 to the 10 to the 10 to the 123rd power. And in order to understand this, this is basically 10 with, I believe it's 12,300 zeros after. So whatever that number is, that number is That number far exceeds even the number of seconds we've had in our universe and even the number of particles within our universe. That's how vast that number is. Now, we can come to understand that the world and the universe is fine-tuned in such a way to where there can be a life-permitting earth. We are able to live on this earth. And obviously, this couldn't have happened by chance. Neither could it have happened by necessity, because we know that the universe did, in fact, have a beginning. We know this from the Big Bang, and we know this from the second law of thermodynamics. The Big Bang showing that time, space, matter, and energy once all came like that, the Big Bang, it had a beginning. But we also know from the second law of thermodynamics that the universe is in a state of continual expansion. Things are moving farther apart from each other, and eventually there's going to be a heat collapse where things grow very cold, and then they're no longer able to live in the way in which they are, because again, as the universe expands out, heat is being spread out, and then with that comes the ability to have a life-permitting Earth to dwindle away as the years go on. So when we understand this, that the Earth was fine-tuned in such a way where the Earth is life-permitting, we know that there had to have been a mind, a great mind with so much knowledge to be able to orchestrate this in such a way and to be so detailed that we are able to live and exist here. And we know from Romans 1:20 that everyone is able to see that God's invisible attributes and his divine power, so that no one can have an excuse. No one is able to say, well, I just couldn't understand that there was someone outside of me that created that which is. That is, no one can have that excuse. And so with understanding this, we can now come to understand that God knows the end from the beginning because he works out the beginning from the end. So when it comes to quantum mechanics, again, just think of wavelengths, all these different possibilities. God knows all these different possibilities of what would happen, what could happen, and then based upon him seeing this, whatever he chooses to see is what becomes actualized. Now, it's important to know there's a difference between God's sight and God's knowledge. God can know something without seeing it actually happen. We know this from there's a certain passage in 1st or 2nd Kings or 1st and 2nd Chronicles, I believe, where David is having this dialogue with God, and he says, if I go to this city, will the people hand me over to King Saul? Because at the time, King Saul was trying to kill him. And God goes, yes, that would happen if you go there. The people will give you up. So what does David do? He ends up not going to that city, but he flees elsewhere. And so what just happened? God made a truth claim that was not actualized and never happened. God said, yes, this is what would happen and this is what will happen if you do this. So David chose to go a different way, and therefore this very thing that God knew would happen if David had done that never came to be. So when it comes to quantum mechanics, just being able to proving God and his existence and how he is able to have created the world in such a way to where it's life permitting, God saw all these different possibilities. He saw all these different things where you and I could have been born in 20 BC. We could have been born in 1600s. We could have had a different family we were born under in this life. He knows all these different possibilities and variables. And then based upon this, again, he is at the end. So he is at the very end of all that is. So he's looking at all these different possibilities of what could be. And then he chooses to see the best possible option that he sees based upon his standards to create that very universe and to have people in certain parts within time and space. And then from there, from the end, he works out the beginning, And then obviously from the beginning, he foreknows the end because, again, he's seen all these variables of what quantum mechanics says. And then whatever he focuses his sight on, based upon his knowledge, so this is just knowledge basis, he just knows all these different things. Whatever he chooses to see is what therefore is created, made, begins, and then will be worked out towards the end. So hopefully that sheds a little insight on God and how quantum mechanics can prove God, and it just gives us understanding from the standpoint of knowing that this universe was not randomly created. It didn't happen by chance. It didn't happen by the necessity of its own nature because it had a beginning. We know that it took a supreme, infinite mind that is able to have all this knowledge, even knowledge that is knowable but will never come to be. He's able to possess all this because he alone is God. And because he has all this knowledge of what eventually will happen, what could happen, what would happen, what should happen, he knows all of this. And because he is the eternal one, and he is the one who is both within time yet outside time, he therefore is able to see all these variables and then create from the end, speak into existence what will be in the beginning, and then work it out by foreknowing all that's going to happen, because he has not only known it, all the different possibilities, but now he has created, and what he has seen is what becomes actualized, and what is actualized in the beginning is what moves towards the end of God's divine will. So God is never caught off guard by anything. He knows all these different things, and he knows when we're going to mess up, when we're going to sin. He knows the times we're going to repent, the times where we're unrepentant. He knows who is going to want to choose to respond to his call and who's going to choose to reject his call. He knows all these different things. And so based upon quantum mechanics, God alone is the one who has all knowledge, because again, on the very microscopic, smallest level known to man, everything is a wavelength. And wherever something can be seen within that wavelength, the wavelength collapses and it becomes that very thing. Again, in the particle example, when we slit the particle has a wavelength, but wherever we look at, let's say we look over here, that's where the wavelength collapses and that's where the particle is. But God has this not only on a microscopic level, but also a macro level, because there are many different wavelengths of possibilities of, oh, we could allow Lance to do this, or oh, I could allow this person to drive towards this meeting and meet this certain people. Oh, I could, there could be a time where I allow this tree to fall and block someone that would have gotten in an accident otherwise, or I could just let the tree stay and then I could just speak to that person in their mind, or just allow them maybe to get in the accident, and then if they get in the accident, there will be a healing process through that, and they'll be able to meet the surgeon. Maybe they're a Christian who meets the surgeon, they share the gospel, the surgeon becomes a believer. God knows all these variables and possibilities, and it is absolutely incredible. So God alone is the one who both knows where things are and what they are doing. For us, on the quantum mechanics level, if we know where something is, we don't know what it's doing. But if we know what it's doing, we don't know where it is. God knows both, because he is the supreme, infinite mind that has all knowledge. And whatever he chooses to see is what he has chosen to create and speak into existence. And it is that very thing that will be and go on in time, because God has done that and seen that and created that which he has already assessed based upon his infinite knowledge.